Right now, Japan is preparing for war with Russia. The East strikes at the Russian Federation. A secret plan has come to light. An invasion of the Kuril Islands.
Japan has dropped the bomb.
You will be shocked when you hear this. Ukraine and Azerbaijan have formed a secret alliance.
Fighter jets and drones have been deployed.
This has never happened before. The crisis is already at the doorstep of Russians.
The facility is exposed and the oil industry is collapsing.
The Kremlin is in ruins.
A hidden fact has been revealed in the Security Council.
The Russians have suffered a humiliating blow.
The embarrassment of the century.
At the Chinese summit, Russia was simply dismissed.
Putin's plan has completely fallen apart.
There has never been such a fiasco.
The conspiracy has been exposed.
The US has unveiled a new peace plan.
Secret agreements have surfaced.
This is shocking.
All this and more in our upcoming report.
Hotspot.
Breaking news. Russia is on the brink of a major war.
Japan is preparing for a deadly attack.
The Kurils and more.
Shock.
Putin turned pale after what he heard.
His aide let something slip.
The secret plan has been revealed.
Something terrible is coming.
These details will surprise you.
Watch this.
Russia is preparing for yet another war. The dispute over the Kurils is gaining momentum.
This is a complicated issue here as well.
Moscow has stated that Japan is planning to make new territorial claims against Russia.
According to Putin's aide, Nikolai Patrushev, this poses a direct threat to the national security of the Russian Federation.
From his point of view, Tokyo's policy, which seeks the return of the islands, is driven by commercial interests. Today, what the Japanese want regarding the so-called northern territories is not justice, but resources, both mineral and biological resources.
The sea depths around the Kurils have unique hydrography.
Russia is a vassal of China.
China and Japan are strategic adversaries.
Therefore, any significant remark or statement from Nikolai Patrushev, President Vladimir Putin, or indeed anyone else from the prominent Russian leadership is, in a very direct and deliberate way, a significant diplomatic gesture and a crucial strategic message being conveyed from Moscow, specifically directed towards its highly influential and senior partner, President Vladimir Putin.
So it's probably not worth being surprised by this statement, but overall, it's also important to understand that Russia is aggressively disposed toward any representative of the Western Bloc.
Patrushev also emphasized that Russia will not sit idly by in the face of Tokyo's militarization policy and will increase its defensive capabilities in the Far East.
Russia always uses claims that someone allegedly wants to attack it as a pretext for aggression.
This is unchanging. It has always been this way.
And the most recent wars that Russia started also began in roughly the same way.
Russia never attacks first. This is the foundation of their ideology. They always claim to be repelling someone else's aggression. Therefore, from the perspective of Russian statements and diplomacy, making accusations,
accusing someone of allegedly wanting to attack Russia is always a kind of first stage.
In order to launch aggression against someone.
First and foremost, it's about wanting to appear a certain way rather than actually being that way.
At the moment, Russia does not have enough resources to wage a full-scale war with Ukraine, prepare for a potential invasion of the Baltic states, and at the same time build up military resources.
In the Far East, rather, it's more a declaration of intent and...
Again, the message to China is that in the context of confrontation with Chinese adversaries, Russia is ready to be a major ally and a junior partner in any initiative from Beijing.
And once again, the Russian dictator's aide stated that Russia rightfully owns the islands.
And there's nothing to discuss here. At the moment, their status is disputed. Japan considers this to be their territory, and it is their territory, but Russia controls these territories, however. At the same time, Japan does not recognize this legally.
The point is that for more than 70 years, the countries have been unable to sign a peace treaty.
Because of the territorial dispute over the Kuril Islands.
Tokyo names the return of the islands as the main condition for signing it.
But the Kremlin believes that the southern Kurils became part of the USSR as a result of World War II.
And that sovereignty over them is not in question.
The corresponding Kuril Islands, including
Some islands, which Japan calls the Northern Territories, and believes that they are unrelated.
Directly regarding the Saninkuli Islands, they were occupied by the Soviet Union. But this was not legally finalized in the form of a specific treaty.
And now the prospects for this treaty are looking more and more doubtful.
That is, even back in Yeltsin's time, there was a draft of the corresponding treaty that would have settled all issues, particularly territorial ones.
There was an interesting proposal that Russia would return 2 small islands to Japan.
In exchange, Japan would recognize Russia's control over the 2 remaining small islands,
which are slightly larger islands.
and in this way, a certain diplomatic solution would be found.
But at that time, it all fell through.
Russian dictators and the former Prime Minister of Japan met 25 times to try to reach an agreement on the islands, but without success.
And after the constitution was amended, the transfer of any part of Russian territory was made illegal.
In Russia, the law and the constitution are considered norms, something absolutely unbreakable.
Putin himself was elected for only 2 terms according to the constitution, and he still rules.
And the Russian constitution has already been changed so often that I think that everything here lies in the essence of the problem is not in some constitution, but in the fact that Putin's personal desire to demonstrate his own
Imperial grandeur.
But Putin is not eternal.
Yes, and Russian imperialism is not eternal either. In March 2023, Russia broke off peace treaty negotiations with Japan, which had supported Western sanctions after the invasion of Ukraine.
Urgent.
A secret agreement between Ukraine and Azerbaijan. An incredible move was made in Baku.
Aliyev surprised everyone.
Fighter jets to battle.
Here we go.
Bayraktars are back.
Hellish strikes on Russians in the SU destroyed shocking targets.
A fuel collapse is already near.
Strikes on oil refineries are finishing off the industry. Watch for all the latest developments.
It looks beautiful, of course. And how beautiful it is. Truly a sight to behold. But unfortunately for Russians, this is not a dawn but a looming fuel crisis.
Again.
After all, after a drone attack, it burns so beautifully.
The Ryazan oil refinery is the largest and most important element of the country's fuel supply.
Who? So, is a new fuel crisis on the way?
Well, let's put it this way. As far as I know, the previous fuel crisis hasn't been cancelled.
It's still ongoing.
Fuel is disappearing from sale in various regions.
The young and promising republic of the DPR, Crimea, LPR, Zabaykalsky Krai, even the Moscow region has experienced disruptions.
Therefore, with 100% probability, Ukraine will continue to attack all these refineries.
What's the objective?
To prevent the refineries from recovering before they can resume production, or rather, fuel processing. But Ryazan wasn't the only one affected. Ukrainian drones also attacked an oil depot in occupied Luhansk, which was also supplying fuel to the Russian army.
Meanwhile, on the front line, the Ukrainian armed forces advanced in the Kupiansk and Pokrovsk directions, and also successfully counterattacked Russian troops who had made gains in the north of Sumy region.
The situation is becoming more complicated in the Lyman direction.
There, the occupiers are trying to intensify their assaults and increase the size of their assault groups. But, as reported, all attacks have been successfully repelled by Ukraine's defenders.
Of course, they will intensify.
Of course, they will keep trying. Of course, they will continue.
They've been doing this for 3.5 years now.
In other words, they keep finding resources.
Their own resources, they look for weak spots in the Ukrainian defense and try to push through.
In different directions, there may be different commanders with different levels of their own egos. Some are content to just do what they're told and don't show any initiative of their own. But there are commanders who are ready to stomp the ground, who are willing to take initiative to seize some territories.
They tried to hide it, but unsuccessfully.
The Russian invaders hid a valuable armored vehicle in one of the abandoned buildings. But unfortunately for them, the Ukrainian armed forces still found it and destroyed it.
That's how beautifully $10 million go up in flames. And to be more specific, it was a Buk M1 surface-to-air missile system.
$10 million, not that much really. That's basically the price of 2 new Russian tanks. Each one costs about $4 million.
So 10 million isn't such a big number. Yes, the system which helps shoot down Ukrainian drones, operates at a short range, and there are many of them in the Russian Federation.
I don't know what you do with them on the move, but in any case, a destroyed system that was operational, maintained, and equipped with electronics means one less opportunity for the Russian Federation to shoot down our birds, and one more opportunity for our birds to reach deeper targets.
Fighter jets from Azerbaijan?
The war zone reports that Azerbaijan, strangely enough, may have unofficially transferred its fighter jets to Ukraine.
MiG-29s, as confirmed by a photo of that very fighter jet.
And no one is denying its authenticity. Shocking!
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has released classified information.
A major fiasco for the Russian army.
Putin hid this for months, but the truth has come out. A complete disaster for Moscow.
A Russian general got into serious trouble.
And the Russian offensive ended in nothing.
All the shocking details are coming up. Caught 36 hours after the crime.
In the Khmelnytsky region, a suspect in the murder of Andrei Parubi was detained.
The criminal has already given his first testimony.
Police officers and employees of the Security Service of Ukraine were on the direct trail of the alleged killer just 24 hours after the attack. But meanwhile, more propaganda is being spread in Russia. Pro-government Russian media are reporting on the murder of the Ukrainian politician as the elimination of one of the Euro-Maiden leaders, with blood on his hands.
With the blood of hundreds of Ukrainians on his hands. Andrei Parubi was at the origins of the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014.
He led the so-called Euro-Maiden self-defense. It was Parubi who gave orders to the snipers who shot at protesters, anti-Maidan supporters, and Berkut officers. But while Russian propagandists are writing yet another script full of lies, in the Krasnodar region, drones attacked an electrical substation, leaving some Russians without power.
In addition, residents of Yelabuga in Tatarstan reported explosions, and Rosaviatsia announced the closure of airports in Kazan and Nizhnekamsk.
There were also explosions and fires in temporarily occupied Crimea.
Special forces from the GUR's GOST unit struck military infrastructure and destroyed several targets.
Among them were an S-400 complex and a radio telescope. But in Russia, despite the enemy's losses, they continue to talk about victories at the front. On August 30th, Gerasimov summed up the results of combat operations for the spring-summer period. The Russian general claimed successes by the occupiers in their active advances on several fronts at once.
But all of this turned out to be lies.
The Ukrainian General Staff noted that these offensives by the occupiers ended in virtually nothing.
Not only did the so-called summer offensive of the Russian occupation forces fail, but so did 4 years of active combat operations. The occupying forces were unable to accomplish even tactical-level objectives of the so-called special military operation, namely reaching the administrative borders of Donetsk region.
At present, about 33% of the territory of Donetsk region remains under the control of Ukraine's defense forces. By the way, Gerasimov's report contains completely different figures.
Supposedly, 27% of the territory of Donetsk region is in Donetsk,
under the control of Ukraine's defense forces.
Gerasimov's blatant lies were even criticized by Russian military bloggers. They accused the Ministry of Defense of exaggerating successes at the front.
For the Russian side, especially the military and political leadership, amid the outright failure of the so-called special military operation, it is extremely important to show at least some successes, even if only at the tactical level, just to calm down.
To reassure the Russian public against the backdrop of an unprecedented level of personnel losses. Let me remind you, at the moment, according to information from Western intelligence communities and the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the occupiers' losses have already exceeded 1,100,000 personnel.
Meanwhile, CSTO exercises have started in Belarus.
According to statements from the General Staff, they are practicing the planning of the use of nuclear weapons. The nature of these statements. Both the Russian and Belarusian sides, according to the exercise scenario, including the rehearsal of the possible use of tactical nuclear weapons, should be regarded as elements of information operations by Russian special services. It should be separately noted that previous information from both the Russian and Belarusian sides regarding the redeployment of tactical nuclear weapons to the territory of the Republic of Belarus has not been confirmed. According to experts, this has not been confirmed, nor has the information about the redeployment of the ultra-modern Oreshnik weapon, with which both the Russian and Belarusian dictators are trying to scare the world.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Putin issued an emergency order.
His statements about NATO troops shocked everyone.
While Zelensky is preparing the army, Trump is making a secret move. This is not just a war.
The whole world has exploded.
Putin put forward conditions that no one expected.
The main target is now NATO.
The details will surprise you.
Watch.
Following the meeting of the coalition of willing countries, the participants declared their readiness to deploy peacekeeping contingents on the territory of Ukraine after the end of the war.
At the moment, we have 26 countries that have officially committed to forming support forces and deploying troops on land, sea, or in the air as part of security guarantees for Ukraine the day after a ceasefire and the onset of peace.
The EU insists that in order to begin real negotiations to end the war in Ukraine, a ceasefire must first be achieved.
Our goal remains clear.
The European Union supports an immediate, full, and unconditional ceasefire. Only in this way can proper conditions for real negotiations be created. Now, more than ever.
Before. UN members need to increase pressure on Russia to stop the killings and start meaningful negotiations.
Putin called Moscow the best place for a meeting with Zelensky, and his press secretary Peskov clarified that this is an invitation to talk, not to surrender. By the way, Donald asked me if possible to arrange such a meeting.
I said yes, it's possible.
After all, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow. That's how it will happen now.
Naturally, President Zelensky mocked the Russian statement and said that they are doing everything to delay peace negotiations.
I believe you know that when you don't want a meeting to happen, you invite me to Moscow. Russia has started talking about a meeting which is already not bad, but so far we do not see their desire to end the war.
And adult leaders at a meeting of this level should come out with some kind of result. Putin also stated that NATO troops in Ukraine would be legitimate targets for Russia and cynically commented on security guarantees.
As for possible military contingents in Ukraine, this is one of the root causes of escalation.
The escalation of Ukraine's involvement with NATO. Therefore, if any foreign troops or military personnel appear there, especially now during these active and ongoing hostilities, we will proceed from the firm assumption that they will be legitimate and valid targets for attack. And if decisions are reached that lead to peace,
To a long-term peace, then I simply don't see any reason for them to be present on the territory of Ukraine.
That's all there is to it?
US President Trump announced that after a conversation with President Zelensky, he plans to speak with the Russian dictator in the near future.
Yes, I will talk.
We are having a very good dialogue.
I have resolved 7 wars.
This is the one that, in my opinion,
Should have been one of the easiest.
you know that feeling when you think something is going to be easier.
It turns out it's a bit more complicated. But in my opinion, it should have been easier because of my relationship with President Putin and with Ukraine.
But we'll manage.
We're going to sort this out.
Slovak Prime Minister Fico, after meeting with Putin in Beijing, is heading to Ukraine to meet with President Zelensky.
The talks will take place today.
Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity during our meeting to ask if there is any message you would like me to convey on your behalf, since we have been closely following the summit with the United States.
I would be very grateful if you could provide me with some basic information about where we stand and what we should expect, because on the one hand, I am being harshly criticized for being here and meeting with you, but on the other hand, tomorrow everyone will be asking what President Putin told you. While the entire civilized world is trying to find a solution to end the war as soon as possible, Putin and his inner circle continue to lie and speculate, which proves they are still not interested in peace.
Shock.
The Chinese summit turned into an embarrassment for the Kremlin. Putin lost the battle for influence.
All attempts to weaken Ukraine have failed.
What really happened?
It has come to light.
The details will surprise you.
Watch.
The SCO summit in Tianjin effectively ended in failure for Russia.
Putin failed to impose his position on the war in Ukraine on the summit's member countries.
In the final declaration, the participants stated their intention to strengthen ties, expressed concern over the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, condemned the strikes by Israel and the US on Iran, and did not say a single word about the war in Ukraine.
Official China did not support Russia.
China is keeping the intrigue going with the US and the West.
It's important not to forget that.
At the same time, meetings are taking place between US and Chinese government and financial circles regarding future economic and political trade cooperation.
And these meetings are being held on a systematic basis.
So, expecting China to say something in this declaration is not realistic. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine called the fact that the summit's final statement did not mention the war in Ukraine at all very telling.
The absence of any mention of Russia's war against Ukraine in the SCO summit declaration is evidence of the failure of Moscow's diplomatic efforts.
The Kremlin has suffered yet another defeat in its attempts to portray the world as divided in its assessment of Russian aggression against Ukraine, and to impose the idea that countries outside Europe and North America are aligned with Russia.
A look at the reasons, consequences, and ways to end its war against Ukraine.
There is no mention of the war in the official declaration because the members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization do not have a unified position on the Russia-Ukraine war.
And this is very important for Kyiv.
No matter what songs Russian propagandists may sing after the SCO summit, I wouldn't say that Putin's narratives dominated this event in China.
What Putin said in his speech is one thing, but the official document is something else entirely.
The absence of Ukraine in the declaration means that either China and India did not want to support the Russian position, or there were disagreements in the assessment of the Russia-Ukraine war,
and about what should be done next.
It is precisely in such situations that a specific issue is usually not mentioned.
The SCO summit, above all, demonstrated China's dominance among the countries of the global south and its claim to the role of world leader.
This is still not a success.
The SCO is a failure of American and European policy.
That is, Mr. Trump in just half a year managed to bring together India, Pakistan, and China on the same platform, even though it would seem less than 6 months have passed since the military conflict between India and Pakistan.
In fact, in many countries there is dissatisfaction with the customs policy introduced by the Trump administration, and specifically with those tariffs.
The results of the SCO summit turned out to be an unpleasant surprise for Trump because of his policies. Tariffs imposed on other countries such as India.
As for Putin, he came to China not with new ideas but with the same old tune.
And the participants of the summit are not particularly concerned about the Russia-Ukraine war.
The head of the Kremlin did not find support among the participants because otherwise Kyiv would certainly have been mentioned in the final declaration, and in a context favorable to Moscow.
A sensation. It has become known.
The US is pushing a new peace plan.
There is a behind-the-scenes game going on. This is what they want to push Ukraine towards.
Putin is playing his own game.
The front is ablaze and negotiations are at a dead end.
What awaits Kyiv?
Next.
Watch. Ukraine as the shield of Europe.
President Volodymyr Zelensky warns,
Any territorial concessions to Russia will not stop the war, but will only turn the captured regions into a launching pad for new attacks.
The Kremlin has already practiced this strategy when Crimea became a springboard for pressure on the south and part of the east for the complete occupation of the region.
If tomorrow somehow we were to leave Donbass, which will not happen, we would open up unprotected space for Putin.
Right next to the city of Kharkiv with its 1.5 million residents.
He would also seize the industrial center of Dnipro.
This would open up new opportunities for him.
The president of Ukraine is urging Europeans to think on a larger scale.
After all, if the Kremlin had managed to carry out its original plan to seize all of Ukraine, Moscow would have used it not only against Kyiv, but also against the West itself.
if Putin had managed to capture our entire country, he would have used it as a springboard as well.
Whether he does this or not will depend on how strong Europe is.
If Europe is strong, he probably won't do anything.
But if it is weak, it will suffer from Russia's actions.
Zelensky also reminds us about geography.
It's less than 3,000 kilometers from Moscow to Paris. And the range of Russian missiles already reaches 2,500 kilometers today.
Ukraine is also developing long-range weapons with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers.
And the arms race is only accelerating.
With such technological development, there can no longer be any distant wars.
Believe me. In 2 years, the Russians will have many missiles, and so will we, with a range of 5,000 kilometers.
The sea won't protect anyone.
The ocean won't protect anyone.
In this regard, the weapons Russia is using today are not so different from nuclear delivery systems.
That is why the fate of Ukraine is not a local war but a matter for all of Europe.
If Kyiv holds out, the eastern border of Europe will remain at the Donbass.
If not, the front line will already run through Poland or Germany.
Just as the Berlin Wall once divided the continent into two worlds. Against the backdrop of these warnings, Zelensky also allows for a Korean scenario for Ukraine.
Without a formal peace treaty, but with a chance for prosperity and development.
The only question is where exactly Europe is ready to draw its eastern border, in Donetsk or in Berlin.
Meanwhile, across the ocean, new statements are being made.
US President Donald Trump, in an interview with NBC, admits that Kyiv and Moscow are not yet ready for a peace agreement.
But he immediately adds a cryptic phrase, saying that something is going to happen soon.
He also announces that he will have a conversation with the Russian dictator in the coming days.
I think we will sort everything out.
To be honest, I thought that dealing with Russia would be easier than with other conflicts that I have resolved.
But it seems that this has turned out to be a bit more complicated than some of them.
For the American leader who not long ago called the war one of the easiest conflicts to resolve, these words sound like an admission.
An admission that the Russia-Ukraine war turned out to be much more complicated than he expected.
It is obvious that Trump will soon try to push Putin. Most likely towards, I think, a trilateral meeting.
After all, Putin is doing everything to show that he supposedly isn't interested in direct talks with the Ukrainian president, Zelensky.
Well, I truly think that a trilateral meeting is still much more realistic, although once again, holding it in the very short term is, in my considered opinion, almost entirely science fiction, a concept that seems quite far-fetched at this particular moment.
Plus, judging by the recent statements from Friedrich Merz, other prominent European leaders, or even Turkish President Erdogan, it is becoming quite abundantly clear that right now it is indeed Vladimir Putin who is actively sabotaging the upcoming and highly anticipated meeting. But the undeniable fact remains that he is deliberately sabotaging it now.
Does not mean that Putin won't be forced to change his point of view in the near future.
But for now, the Russian dictator continues to spill blood on Ukrainian soil.
European leaders are concerned about a possible new Russian offensive.
Bloomberg reports that in Toulon, at a Security Council meeting, German and French officials discussed the buildup of Russian troops near Pokrovsk.
Volodymyr Zelensky himself recently stated that about 100,000 soldiers are concentrated in this direction.
The capture of Pokrovsk would open the way to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, key cities for controlling the entire Donetsk region.
I don't understand what new offensive in the east the Western media are writing about.
Because there is only one offensive and it has been steadily ongoing for more than a year, with varying phases of Russian activity.
These phases depend on losses and reserves. Putin continues to pursue a strategy of dragging out the negotiation process. The specific points that he vocally expressed and directly articulated at the press conference held in China were widely supposed to, at the very least, somewhat cool the intense ardor and fervent enthusiasm that had been building up.
Of the broad and influential coalition that genuinely wants to form the final comprehensive proposal on security guarantees for Ukraine. Nevertheless, what we are now seeing directly and quite clearly in Paris, what we observe is that absolutely no one is even remotely planning to significantly slow down the ongoing process, not even for a moment.
It is precisely this crystallization of security guarantees for our state that shows that, in principle, we are making small, but nevertheless, steps along the diplomatic track.
Today, the choice stands not only before Ukraine, but before the entire West.
The decisions that will be made at future negotiations with Moscow will determine not only the fate of Ukraine,
but also the security of all of Europe.
Will peace be restored on Ukrainian soil, or will the war spread further?
This is a question to which no one has an answer yet.
That's all for now.
And for more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.